Okay, I've made good progress this morning, but I made a ridiculous mistake, which was that I forgot that my hotkey in OBS for recording is exactly the same as my hotkey in Blender for putting the cursor to the center of the screen. So as a result, I recorded for like 10 minutes and then accidentally stopped it. There is a lot to cover here. A lot to cover. And this is going to look a little bit strange. So I'm going to recap this as best I can. And it's good for me to recap it for viewers because I'm learning as I go, and it just reinforces in my own mind what I'm learning. So here's the situation. Let's see, am I in the right viewport here? Okay, yeah, there's that, and then there's the UV editor. Okay, so we're in good shape. Alright, so from the camera point of view, let's go to Z wireframe. Okay, so right here you see the ninja mapped, the ninjas I should say, mapped to the background. So we've just dragged and dropped this sequence that we created in Krita. Okay, this sequence was created based on the ink lines that came out of Blender. We did all the coloring. Okay, 225 frames, and then we rendered that out of Krita and assigned it as a background image here in Blender. Okay, on the face of it and with a simple scene, that's fine. That's a good way to do it. You could actually just layer up multiple background, quote-unquote, background images, some of them being foreground, actually, in order to build up a composite if you want to have a composite in Blender's 3D view in real time as opposed to having to use the compositor. Okay, so that's problem number one. The challenge that we ran into then was that when we turn on the texture of Akari, what I did was I went back to opentoonz and I found this image, which when it's rendered, this is what the actual scene looks like. Now we're going to have to change this scene, unfortunately, because that window is in the wrong place. You can see it here in Blender. The window's actually supposed to start from here and go to over here. So that, when it pans over to the ninja, there's the window. So you can kind of see, without me necessarily spelling it out, what's going on there. So then what I did was I went ahead and clicked here and took a screenshot of this and brought that into Blender as a background image. And then I fine-tuned this plane right here that is the image of Akari. I went ahead and hit the G key and then hit shift so I could just perfectly fine-tune the positioning of this image so that when we transition from this shot to this shot, it's not going to jump. She's in the exact right position. Okay, so we've got her in there and we got this background image. And there, as you can see right there, here you can see the background image sequence, and then poof, it disappears. Well, why is that? Great question. And the answer is I actually am not sure. It was behaving properly earlier, and I haven't yet explained some other things that will make this clearer, but the bottom line is what you might be seeing right there might not be the background image, actually. What you might be seeing there is this texture. Now when I change this to a material, so it's no longer a texture but it's a material, you can see it animating in the 3D view. So why is that going on? Well, here's why. What I realized is if I go ahead and add a background, so here's your background image, okay, and what I did was I just painted over that with again, Blender is okay. I love you, Blender, But the hard thing about Blender is there's just so freaking much to remember. Every little setting here, you got to have it right in order for things to behave properly in the 3D viewport and stuff like that. You know, one example of what I'm talking about that makes this kind of stuff difficult is that here we have this plane. If I put it in texture mode, at least in this viewport, oh, this is so maddening. In this viewport, you can see that? Okay, now I know why it was disappearing. Okay, now I know what was going on. Okay, so in texture mode, what would happen is we would see what I'm directing your attention to is this right here. We see the image sequence. Now, this is something you need to know. The minute that plane falls behind the other plane, even though the plane might be transparent and have transparency painted into it in its alpha channel, doesn't matter. You still can't see through it. So there's some nuance there in terms of how Blender works with the 3D viewport that's a little confusing. I think if I turn it around this way, maybe we'll see it, and we do. Okay? So from this point of view, we can see it. So if you want to see it properly in the 3D view, reliably, you want to have it in material mode. Okay, so in material mode, this is also strange. To tell you the truth, this is actually really strange. This what you see right here in reverse is my perspective lines on this texture, and then I went ahead and painted out the alpha on part of it. This item now is visible from behind, but not from in front. See that? Why? Not the faintest clue. I have not the faintest clue why that would be. Can we flip the can we just flip the polygon? I believe the N key. No, apparently that's not it. I have not flipped a polygon in Blender in probably 15 years. Okay? I don't remember how to flip a polygon in Blender. I know what I want to do. I definitely know what I want to do. But how do you do it? Let's try this. Let's try this. Extrude, insert faces, subdivide, loop and cut, duplicate, delete, merge. So as you can see, everything I want, just like I always rant and rave about the good old days, right, with Blender. The one thing I want to do, which is just flip a polygon. Simplest thing in the world. Oh, can't do it. Nope, can't do it. Where is the hotkey? Mesh. Faces. Flip normals. Okay. And there is no hotkey. Okay, I flipped the normals and it did no good. Okay, so there we've learned that actually what I thought was the solution to the problem isn't the solution at all. Did absolutely no good. Okay, so that's an interesting situation. But it is what it is. My point was, which is really hard to make since what was appearing on the screen properly just a few short minutes ago now refuses to show properly. But that's Blender. Okay, is this more like what we had in mind? This is showing the blue-ish tint of most of the paint that I painted, but it's not showing the painting. Well, that's no big shock because you probably got to be in texture mode, but I put it in texture mode. Maybe if I'm in texture paint mode. Yep, there we go. Oh, man. Okay. Sorry, folks. You know that I'm this close to going into a rant. But I'm not going to rant. Okay, so I'm going to hit the 0 key. So now you can kind of see what is going on here. I drew these perspective lines and drew where the window is properly supposed to be, and now when the camera moves, there it goes. Okay. Now the way I did this, I put the plane, which one certainly wonders why it's not visible or selectable. You know, why is that not visible when it's not selected? Why is it turning white? I think I know why. Let's fix that right now. That's like dumber than a box of rocks. Okay, so let's go to user preferences and let's go to the theme. Somewhere in here in the 3D view there's the color white. Last selected point, I'm just going to change this to anything but white. Active vertex edge. I don't think that's it. Transform. There we go. Let's make this obnoxious. Let's make it a pretty color. Text highlight. I'm saving my user settings. Okay, did that work? Nope, that didn't work. Darn it. Okay, so do I want to sit here on a YouTube video and spend, 45 minutes trying to find some really obscure thing in Blender that says if you go into your theme settings, you can change the color for anything at all, except the one thing you're looking for. I see this kind of stuff all the time. It's really annoying, but hey, okay, I'm gonna move forward. So what I did was I mapped. Okay, I gotta back up here. As I said, this was a background image, but when I put this plane in the, okay, it's wanting to texture paint. When I put this plane in the scene that has the image of the wall and floor, even though in texture paint I painted the alpha out, in other words, I put a hole in the, I don't know why this, you have to be in texture paint mode. I'm going to assume maybe I haven't assigned UV mapping to this plane. Let's see if that's the problem. Let's just try to solve it. So this is what's happening today. What's happening is I'm running into one problem after another that keeps me from just doing what I want to do. I know exactly what I want to do. Map this image to the plane, have it animate, put them in this order, lock it to the camera. It's all simple. But you can't just do it. You've got to know all the little tiny little nuances of Blender in order to wrap your head around why it does what it does. And once you know it, it's powerful. The tools are amazing. But it is frustrating when you're trying to work at a fairly high level and you just want to do what you want to do. So an example of that would be the question of if you, and this is what I bumped into when I realized that the screen recorder was not recording. If you take an image sequence and map it to a plane, okay, and you're in texture mode, even if you're in material mode, so you have UV mapping assigned to that plane, you assign it as an image sequence. The image sequence in the UV image editor plays back in sequence exactly as expected. You have the settings on that image sequence set properly. So if I go here to, for example, this, you can see up here that I have the correct number of frames. It is an image sequence. It is in auto refresh mode. If I were to play this here, you would see that, yes, in fact, it does play, but then you go into the 3D view, you can't see it move. All you see is the first frame. Why? Why? Well, what you come to find out is that you're only allowed to see it if you also assign it to the plane as a texture. You can't just have the image sequence. Now, I've seen aberrant behavior in Blender whereby if you have only one image sequence mapped to a plane in the 3D view, it will play back. But if you have two, it won't. Why? I have no clue. Not a clue. And that's why I say that's Blender. There's so much nuance and persnickety detail about how you do what you do so that you can see what you want to see that it can drive you nuts. That is what we're fighting with today a bit. Okay. But we're dealing with it. So the problem that I have here is I have to be in texture paint mode to even see what I'm doing. And I'll come back to why in a moment. But what I think I want to say is, right now you're seeing, right there, you are seeing the plane that has the Ninja map to it. But because it's locked to the camera, the minute the camera gets close enough to just pan over here, dolly actually is the proper term, dolly or truck in. This plane, and I have to jump back out of object, back into object mode so I can grab this. This plane, because it's locked to the camera, moves behind the other plane, as you can just see. The minute it moves behind it, even though there's alpha painted out into this plane, you can't see through it. Okay. That's the way it works. So what does that mean? I would assume I have to assign some UV mapping to this plane and have not yet done that. Okay, but you can see that's the problem I'm running to. Now I could solve it by simply moving this plane closer to the camera and then resizing it. That would be a perfectly legitimate solution to the problem. But to be fair, I'd like to solve all the problems, because let's face it, guys, this is going to come up again. This is going to probably come up many times. Again, as I have said previously, if I had it to do over again, I would do everything on a flat plane, at higher than HD resolution if necessary, if there's a camera pan across the shot. And then I would do the 3D camera move as my very last step. In my case here, what I did was I kind of did everything wrong. I baked the 3D camera move in early, and I also did my ink in Blender, which I will never do again, because it creates so many non-closed shapes that you can't fill with a flood fill tool in, say Krita or opentoonz. So, and it's the problem is so replete that you just can't get away from it. Every other click feels like you're dealing with something that you can't fill. So, but in this case, I thought, you know what? Let's see it through. Let's see this process through. Let's learn what we have to learn. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this one and I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm hoping if I unwrap it, just the default mapping may be suitable. But if it was, I think I would see the mapped texture here. So I got to get some insight about what the heck is going on with the material that's assigned to that plane. Okay, so here, so here's our background image. This one is face textures, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is another nuance. This is so strange. It's really strange. So I have to explain it, because you're going, what are you talking about, Dave? Okay. You can see here, look up here. All I did with this plane was what you just saw me do, which was I put it into edit mode and I unwrapped it. I hit the U key and I unwrapped it. And then Blender very courteously provided me with a paint slot so that I could start painting on this plane. Okay? You can see here, I didn't create this material. Blender created it for me. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. So there's only a couple little teeny weeny incy bitsy problems. One is you can only see it from behind now. Earlier you couldn't. Okay. Things just changed. That's okay. I'm sure it's something I did. But the part that's really bizarre about it is if you're going to unwrap a plane and you're going to UV map it and you're going to paint on the stupid thing, why would you not want the material to have face textures enabled? In what parallel universe would that actually make sense? Answer, 0. There is no universe where that makes sense. So I'm going to turn on face textures. And I'm going to turn on face textures alpha. Okay. Let's just see what happens. Material. So what if I go to texture mode but also go to texture paint? Okay. Now I can see it, but it's upside down. It's the complete opposite of what I actually painted earlier. Okay. Let's make it shadeless as well so that everything's a little more predictable. Okay, so this is you know, we're going with it, man. Okay. So what maybe should we do? Let's say we're going to go to this view, and I'm just going to try to make my life as easy as possible by just cheating. I'm just going to flip the stupid thing. But the problem is it looks like the center of it is kind of in the wrong place. And by the way, so is the cursor. Alright, so let's see what happens here. Okay, so what we're going to do is, let's look at this. Okay, it says the cursor is over there. I want this to rotate around its own natural center. So I'm going to make sure I hit the comma key. Okay, it says the center's there. Am I seeing this wrong in terms of the dimensionality of it? My sense is that this is going to not flip like I want it to. But okay, let's do that. Let's go back to this view. Sorry I'm sniffing so much, folks. And I got to go in texture paint mode just to see it. Okay, and exactly as I feared, it's not in the right position. And of course, if I go into object mode, I can't see the texture. If I could see the texture, I could reposition it, but I can only reposition it if I'm in texture paint mode. So I swear I did assign UVs to this. But let's go into tab mode. Let's just try it again. Let's unwrap. Okay, object has a non-uniform scale. Yeah, I knew that. Okay. So how do we see it? Okay, let's keep working with this. Do we need to assign it as a texture? It looks like here it was assigned as a texture, which is a little bizarre because I never assigned this image to it as a texture. So I'm going to turn that texture off and see what happens. That doesn't do anything. Let's show the alpha. Okay, let's show the alpha. Use the alpha. Let's go to material. Let's turn face textures off. We don't want to be in texture paint mode anymore. We really want to be in material mode. Okay, now we're seeing it. But it's being blocked by the image of the oh, I'm getting confused here because I'm not seeing things from the camera view at this point. So let's go back to the camera view. And everything is no longer lined up correctly, which suggests that there's some strange things going on. But let's deal with one confusing issue at a time. Okay. So, you know, again, this is the kind of thing you run into in Blender, like over and over and over again. If I go into this mode, I can see this, and if I go into that mode, I can see that, but I can't see them both at the same time, which means I could never line them up relative to each other. Unless you know all the little tiny secrets. Lots of secrets. Nothing intuitive, and that's fine. We're going to work with it. So as you can see, that is mapped to the camera. And we can see this one in the materials view, but we can't see Akari. So unfortunately, I think what we're going to have to do is just deal with, we're going to have to do everything the hard way. Everything the hard way. You know, the intuitive thing would be you drag an image onto a plane and it just shows up in the 3D viewport, end of story. There's no prep, there's no dinking around with it for 2 hours just so you do every little thing right so you can see. No, you just see it. There it is. Okay, so same situation here. This for whatever reason, Blender very nicely did assign it to the plane. But I think its material, this is being called material 2, so let's call this floor and wall 1. I think the problem here has to do with transparency. Okay, I don't know about the face textures, but I do think that transparency needs to be turned on. And we want Z transparency. Let's turn this off. So again, not especially intuitive. We know here in the texture view, we know that there's transparency painted right into the image, but here in the view, can we see it? We're not allowed to see it. Nope, you're not allowed. Nope. Why not? Oh, we don't know. It's a big secret. Big secret why. Okay, so you're hosed. Can't do it. Okay, so what do? Well, let's just go through all kinds of dicking around to see. Okay. Could it be that we have to assign that particular texture to the transparency channel? Yeah, probably. That's probably what's going on. So let's go there, and let's go not just to color, but also not translucency, not mirror, ambient, intensity, normal, warp. Okay, so this is one of those classic cases where I'm sure I'm looking straight at something and not seeing it. Alpha. I'm thinking transparency, and it should be alpha. Okay, so we assign it to the alpha, and did anything change is the question. Nope, it's still blocking it. So it does appear to be positioned properly, but as you can see, the various images are still blocking each other. So there's no concept of an alpha channel in the viewport. Let's go to texture mode. Nope. Well, what we did before that let us see things the way we wanted to see them was we went to texture mode and then texture paint. And unfortunately, that's just not going to work. So this is where at least for me, I find myself falling back on like ridiculous fixes. And as you can see now this one's screwed up. Now this one's not. Oh, until I click it. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I shouldn't be so harsh, you know. Blender's only had 20. Actually, yeah, 20 years. They've only had 20 years to make it so that things show up in the viewport the way they did in, you know, say Hash Animation Master 20 years ago. The stuff I'm struggling with right now worked fine in Animation Master 20 years ago. 20 years ago. All these years they haven't figured out how to make things, and believe me, I know that you can make the argument. You say, well, no, if you do this, if you set this and set that and assign this and blue that and turn on this option, blah, 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 and blah, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's like, you know, I just assigned the texture to the alpha. But do we get to see it? No, we don't get to see it. Okay. See there? That's clearly that's working. What about this one? So if we turn the alpha off, we see it as white, but if we turn it on, okay. Alright. You know what that means? I know what that means. What that means is that this area in the texture that's supposed to be transparent, in the image that's mapped to it, should not be transparent. It should be black. Watch this. Oh, duh, that's what I thought. I should have known that. Of course I should have known that. I'm going to draw that black. Let's see what happens. We'll see if I'm wrong. I'm probably wrong, but... Okay, so if we're going to assign that to alpha, then... Okay, So once again, what's the problem? Okay, I'm just following it through logically. What's going on? Well, it's the opposite. It didn't need to be black. The key is that everything else has to be white. Or something of that nature. Why? Because the whole point is that you want to take the overall in the material, the overall transparency, and turn it down. Up! And look what just happened. Okay. So if you're going to map it to transparency, sorry, I just clicked the wrong thing. You got to turn your alpha off. Okay. Guys, we're going to figure this out. We are going to figure it out if it kills us. All right, so now we're going to erase alpha. And I'm going to just take my tablet and... Because like I said, all the capabilities are there. That's what's so cool about Blender. Everything you need is there. But man, sometimes figuring out how to do it, and especially trying to do it anything resembling quickly, is just, it's really tough. Okay, but we're getting it. We're getting it figured out. Okay, so now I'm going to actually hit the S key here and switch this back to mix mode. I suppose that's going to be, okay, that's cool. So just so I don't even know why I'm using this blue color, but okay, so now we're back here, and yes, we're in the grease pencil view, and what we really want to do is go back to object mode. Ideally, it'd be material. Okay, so now we've got the same problem here, and that's fine. Let's just fix it. Now we know how to fix it. Let's fix it. We're going to go into here, and we see that this is the Akari material right there. We see that it's mapped. We want to learn from our previous experience and turn our transparency down. Okay, but then we want to take this image and map it to the alpha. Okay, so now we're almost there. I think we should do the same thing to this one. Okay, so this is camera mapped images, so that's cool. Again, we want transparency to be at 0. Okay, but we want the image sequence to be mapped to the alpha. Okay, so now we can go back to this view, and from the camera's perspective, we should see things kind of sort of more the way we were expecting to. Okay, so now why are we seeing strange ghosting going on? Well, the cool thing is that sort of suggests that under some circumstances maybe we could use this for a special effect. What we're seeing right now is the combination of three things. We are seeing the grease pencil strokes. We are seeing the image mapped to the plane here. Sorry. Will Blender let me grab it? We're seeing that. And we're seeing the background image. Didn't mean to close it, meant to turn it off. Okay, so why is this useful? Well, one thing that's cool about what we're seeing here is it's going to help us get things lined up properly. Okay, so let me think about this. What I think I'm seeing is that this image sequence, it's not that it's not lined up, it's that it's out of sync. Because there it lines up pretty much perfectly. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the offset on that texture is wrong. It's 1 or 2 frames either ahead or behind. Based on the grease pencil lines, it appears to me that it's ahead. But it might be behind. I don't know. I'm no good at that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to go to the camera view. Okay. And actually, I think I need to go to the UV view. Let's pull up. Actually, strike this for a minute. The background image and the image mapped to the plane are both referencing the same image sequence. Therefore, the offset shouldn't make any difference. Okay, so yet another mystery. So that suggests to me that we go back to frame 0 and look at what happens over the first few frames. Like right here. Okay, right here. Okay, so now there we can see it. There's the first time we can see it. Is that the background image or is that the plane? Okay, there's the plane I just grabbed. Nope, I'm sorry. I didn't grab the plane. I grabbed the camera. So there it is. Okay, we grabbed that. Okay, so now if I wiggle it around, okay, that's what I'm seeing. Whereas if I go to the next frame, you know, and actually you can see from the grease pencil strokes, yeah, you can see from the grease pencil strokes that that frame on the texture is happening, it's happening one frame too soon. Okay, no problem. So now what I'm going to do is, first of all, we've already decided we're not going to use the background image. So therefore, we might as well just delete it. Now is it still out of sync? Yes, it's one frame off. And now if we modify this, I'm going to say, let's just drop it down to 225 frames. I don't think that's going to fix it, but let's find out. Okay, so it's off by 1. So it seems like the obvious thing to do would be to just start at frame 1. And that might actually make it start 2 frames too early. Doesn't seem to matter. Yep, so everything's off by 1 frame. And this is what you get to do. Let's go. I have to think of everything in reverse, and as you guys know, I'm a little dyslexic. And as you can see here, absolutely nothing we're doing in terms of the. Let's just really screw it up and see if it does anything here. Okay, as you can see, completely botching the UV mapping. Sorry. The parameters of the image sequence literally does nothing in the Blender 3D viewport. 0. It's still 1 frame ahead. It's 1 frame ahead. Everything's 1 frame ahead. And again, I hate to be Mr. Complainer, but this is typical Blender. Everything's off by 1. Changing this doesn't change anything. Okay, okay. Changing that changes nothing. So is it something in here? Is there anywhere in a texture? Yes, there's your problem right there. My own fault, as usual. It's got to start on frame 0, not frame 1. So watch, this is going to be correct now. Okay, no, it's not correct. It's actually 2 frames ahead now. Okay, so did we change anything here? No. Okay, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Actually, let's look at this. At least we can see it here too, so that's good. So what we'll do is we'll go to there, because that's a really obvious. That's a real obvious glitch, and let's just change these settings and see what happens. Okay. So for some bizarre reason, which from my perspective could really only have to do with the fact that it's 0 indexed, somewhere, somehow it's getting out of sync. So okay, yet another problem solved. So that's cool. We're going to get there. Okay, so now we have the really obvious problem of this background image being completely not where it's supposed to be. Alright, so we have the ninjas on their own plane. The grease pencil strokes probably are going to get deleted, but we don't have to. We can. So in other words, here, if you look closely, you can see that comping the grease pencil lines back over the background art does kind of help. So the problem though is this. So let's say let's go on the z-axis and probably line that up to there. Okay, so now one thing that's really clear is that the background images, the background needs to be behind, not in front of our characters. So probably there's a few ways we could do this, but I think based on where the camera's going, I think the best solution is going to be to just move this back to here and then resize it. Okay, so, and actually that looks pretty good. So cool. So we should be able to just do a uniform resizing. Yeah, don't kid yourself, Dave. Don't kid yourself. Okay, let's just see. Okay, so this was kind of what I was worried about. So we have a parallax problem. So the camera moving changes the perspective of the background image. So, and that's why initially I said that we wanted to have these guys close together. So, and I don't know if you guys saw that, but okay. So there's a few ways we can try to crack that nut. First thing we want to do is make sure. Let me just try this. I think this is going to backfire, but I'm going to try it anyway. Okay, I'm going to take this background image and make it as close to the ninjas as possible as long as it's behind them. Okay, so now basically things should look right if we resize it properly. So let's just go here. Fortunately, I don't have any keyframes baked into this thing, so we go about here and we size this down. We can get this lined up roughly correctly. And is he going to be in the right position? Pretty close. So it actually looks to me like, yeah, this needs to go left. That's kind of more like what we probably want. And then, yeah, and I would say just a little bit bigger, which makes sense because what you're seeing is that you want it to be up to the top of the screen for obvious reasons. Okay. Basically, that looks pretty good. I'm well aware that this perspective change does not actually work. There are ways we could fix that. I mean, honestly, we could use a camera mapping technique to actually project the painting onto geometry that's facing this way instead of this way, so that when it shifts perspective, it actually looks right. But I think for what we're doing here, it probably doesn't matter, especially if I modify the perspective just a little bit so it's pointing a little more out instead of quite so extreme. I think we have the latitude to do that sort of thing here. Okay, so is the fact that it's not encompassing the full screen here, is that going to be a problem? Let's just fix that and see if. Yeah, well, if we're going to do that, I'd be going right about there. Okay, that's better. That's definitely better. Save early, save often. Okay, so now, what do we got? 44 minutes. Okay, so now the question becomes, what's the problem? Well, the problem is the ninjas are in front of the background image until the camera moves. So this is kind of what I was alluding to when I talked about the reason doing the 3D camera move was kind of a mistake, doing it so early in the process. This is actually a really strange problem. I can't parent this plane, this background image, to this, because then when the camera moves, the perspective of the background image will change. So we've got this changing perspective baked into the camera move that makes it necessary for the image sequence of the ninjas to be mapped to the camera. And the background has to be behind the ninjas, but it can't be so far that it introduces a parallax problem. And it can't fall in front of them, because then they're not going to cover up the floor when they... So it's a tricky problem. It is definitely a tricky problem. So how do you solve that? What do you do? This is what I think you do. Okay. This is actually what's cool about this process, for all my pissing and moaning, is that the solution is probably, let me think about this. The solution is probably to move the ninjas closer to the camera and resize them. If we do that, we're kind of breaking some rules here, but let's see if that could be a workable solution. Okay, so the problem is he's got to stay in front of the background, right? And by the way, we want it to be as close to the background as possible. So actually, so the problem is that we're going to have a parallax issue here, probably. I mean, I can't imagine why we wouldn't. So let's take a look from the camera's perspective and see what happens. Okay. So if we're going to go that way, then clearly what we need to do is shrink this back down. Well, and actually it's pretty obvious the size it should be shrunk to, because it's going to coincide perfectly with the positioning of the camera. So that's obviously where it needs to be. So it's kind of nice that Blender very helpfully kind of shows us how to fix our stupid problem. Okay, now given that, my guess is that this is only going to work from the perspective of this frame. It's going to gradually go out of sync. Is it? That looked like it didn't. So I know I should know this. Okay, dudes, I think we got it. We got it. We solved it. Yep. Now why is that guy's hair falling behind? Okay. Okay. So when we go to this point of view, okay, so if this works, if it works, and clearly it does, then we should be able to go even further with it. So let's go further with it. Let's put it there. Let's go to the camera view. Let's size it down. Let's go closer. And relative to the grease pencil lines, let's fine tune it. And now let's see if it falls apart here. And it didn't. Okay. The only caveat being that I think we probably do not want the grease pencil lines comped back over it, but and clearly we're going to have to adjust our painting here, but that's okay. Frankly, we can adjust our painting right here in the view. I haven't done a ton of this, but let's give it a crack. Let's go to texture paint mode, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the S key to sample that blue color. And it looks like, lo and behold, Blender's interface, the tactile interactivity of the interface has slowed to a crawl to be functionally unusable. So I'm going to save my work and see if maybe if I close and reopen Blender that might help. Ah, this is a sticky bunch of problems I'm trying to solve here today. But you know, it's one of those things where once you figure it out, it's cool. You know, it is a cool, it's going to look cool. So I'm in texture paint mode. I believe I was using the blue, and now it's back to normal, so that's good. And then it's not back to normal, and then it is, and then it isn't. Back and forth and back we go. Okay. Okay, and so let's hit Control Z. I'm thinking, haven't done this enough. Stroke. Let's go to stroke and let's go to line. Just for now, let's make our life simpler by just doing it as predictably as possible. I guess you have to actually draw the line like so. Okay. And why isn't it drawing the line? Because on a 12-core machine with a pretty good NVIDIA graphics card, maybe Blender will work and maybe Blender won't work. That's why. Yeah, it only took 6 or 7 seconds to draw a line. Golly, I hate to be so critical, but it's like, really? Okay, how's that look? Okay, so now at least we have the guide to know what our painting needs to look like. So let's go back. Well, actually, we should probably do this in the 3D viewport. This is such a pain. All right, let's do space again. All right, so I'm gonna erase that line because I really want to. Is it because of the stabilizer? Let's turn off smooth stroke. Let's turn that off. It doesn't really help. So if anybody's got any tips, obviously I'm not live streaming, I'm recording this, but if anyone has a clue why on this relatively high-powered machine is Blender's texture painting interface slowed to a complete crawl, that would be interesting to know. Now if we go in here, it's fine. But in the 3D view, not so much. Okay, so this is cool. This is cool. We're going to get this. All right, so let's go back here. All I need is essentially 2 lines. Let me ask myself this. Based on what I'm seeing here, could we actually use Blender's grids as our perspective source? I don't think so. It's close, but it's not close enough. So let's go to let's create a line. All we need to do is create a line that's going to be reasonably accurate to give us a guide. So I'm going to say that here, okay, I kind of want like a polyline or something. Let's do it this way. Let's do line. Okay. So I'm going to say there's so I'm basically raising my horizon line a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and draw it across like that. Okay, let's see how that looks. Okay, yes. See, that's more tolerable. So when the camera changes perspective, we don't have this really radical with the more extreme perspective, it didn't really sell when the camera comes around to a different point of view. And by the way, as I'm doing this, I'm skipping over the fact that once I get down here, we got to switch to a completely different set of background images, but we're just going to conquer one mountain at a time here. Okay, so that is working. And let's go to only render, so we can just get a sense of whether it just basically feels good. Okay. Now, I'm going to say that probably having the color correction baked in here was probably a bad idea. But we do have the shadows baked into the ninjas and stuff like that, so okay, so that's interesting. We're kind of back in that same position we were earlier. I guess we have to be in object mode maybe, and maybe material. Yeah, so it's there, but if you want to see it, you got to be in the right mode. Okay, so now that we have that there, we can see that this is slightly flawed. Okay, so in order to make this play, let me just look here. We want to look real closely at this. Okay, so could we fix this with just a simple modification of the texture mapped plane? Let me look at one thing here. Let's go to texture paint. Let's check. Okay, just wanted to make sure that the image that's mapped to the plane didn't jump. Like maybe there's some discrepancy between the texture mapping of it and the UV mapping of it. Kind of a dumb question, but figured it's worth a look just to be safe. Okay, so based on that, how would I do this? I don't want to distort this plane really. So I'm just gonna move it a little bit. Let's see if it sells. That sells. Okay, that's good. That sells. Okay, and by the way, of course, at some point we're going to have to deal with shadows and stuff. So, okay, got that. So now, with that, you can see the problem that we have here. Well, it's not a problem, but obviously this plane is stretched wide, but it shouldn't matter. I mean, think about the great matte painters of old. They all had to deal with having to paint squeezed for like cinescope. You know, so get over it, Dave. All right, let's just say we want this all to be fairly diffuse, and I'm gonna, let's see what happens here if we, oh, we don't want the line. We want to go back to space. So now what we have to do is, I think we want to stick with the local color, if you will, of what we're drawing. Now I wish that Blender would let me effectively mask this to where it would be impossible for me to screw up my alpha channel, but as you can see, if I paint over it, it's not gonna respect the alpha channel. I'm gonna try a couple different modes and see if that makes a difference. That's interesting. What's it do over here? Let's see if it still looks good. Okay, that's good news, because frankly overlay mode is one of the most useful modes for painting, because effectively you're creating light. So now what I'm going to do a few things here. First, let's go back into mix mode. So the first thing I want to do is, gosh, I wish there was a way to tint this whole thing. I wonder. Let's try it this way. I'm going to try to tint this. Let's do a fill, and actually let's do the fill also in overlay mode. Let's just try this first. Okay, so that's not going to really help. we need to do a let's do darken. Okay, that gets us a little closer to what we're after. Okay, so we really don't want these lines to be preventing us from doing a complete fill. So if some of this doesn't make sense, I apologize for that. What I'm doing is I'm just okay, we're not in paint mode, we're in fill mode. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4. Okay, so I think if I hit 4 with my mouse over this, okay, and by the way, we've got another glitch right there. So I'm going to hit 4, and as you can see, it switched to the pencil, so that's good. So now I'm going to hit S to sample that color, and then we're just going to go ahead and erase all of these edges. And why did we do that? Because that allows us now to flood fill the whole area and basically change the color. So the fill is 2, and I want the opacity of it down fairly low. So let's just take black and see what that does. Okay, why did that? I'm going to turn the threshold way up. Okay. Okay, so let's try multiply. Yeah, I think we're still getting the... Oh, maybe not. Okay. Okay, good. That's a step in the right direction. Now her floor is not blue, so we do need to address that. So how do we deal with that? Here's what we're going to do. Man, I'm really making this up as I go along, I must say. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sample this color, but I'm just going to flip it around here on the color wheel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line across here so that I can do an effective flood fill just below the line. Okay, so that means I need to go to line mode here, and we're going to just kind of ballpark this. Nope, that won't work. Can't be too low. Okay. Alright. And of course, we are in fill mode, not pencil mode. My bad. And now I need to turn the radius down again. And now we need to make an adjustment here so that we are in line mode, not pencil mode. And now we're too high. That does not work. And now we need to change the color yet again because the color change that we had is now lost. And so now we can draw this line, and hopefully that means, let's go to flood fill. Okay, so now let's turn the threshold down and see what happens. And unfortunately, see that? See that? So what we learned was that it doesn't do any good ever to have a 1 pixel wide line. You must have it be at least a couple pixels so that Blender will respect the edge that you create. Okay, so now I can go 2 pixels. I've turned the pressure sensitivity off. It is still in line mode. That line should be respected. I believe it's the 2 key. Let's just see what happens. Not bad, not bad. But let's turn the threshold up. Now it's going to fill the whole screen, just as I thought. So now what we are going to do is we're going to split the difference, kind of, sort of. And as you can see, Blender is not real bright when it comes to fill thresholds. Okay. However, that does get us in the ballpark. So now I can go back into fill mode, which I believe is the 2 key. And I can go ahead and turn this pretty well down, put it in overlay mode, turn the threshold up quite high because I want to tint my whole scene, and that actually stopped the presses. That is pretty much exactly what I wanted. So I'm going to, as I like to do, image, let's save the image. And what are we doing? We're doing backgrounds here. Okay, so this is going to be anime images backgrounds. Actually, I don't know if that's what I want. I mean, I guess that would work. So we'll call this Akari's room, floor, and wall. And I'm going to put a 0, 1 on it because I'm just guessing this is probably going to change. Okay. All right. So as I said, we sort of baked the color change into it. The color correction, I should say. Okay, so the whole thing is a little too saturated, that's for sure. But at least we can paint into it and what am I trying to say? This should not be edited in Blender. Okay, I'm going to be beating my head against the wall trying to edit that image in Blender because I need to bring it in GIMP so that I can have a layer mask so it's not even possible to paint into the window area. And I mean, I just need the better painting tools. So let's just face the music. I'm not going to go to Krita. Usually when I'm dealing with you know, an industrial strength painting job, especially if it's going to involve large files, it's pretty much GIMP that I know inside and out. And there are a few things about Krita when it comes to just painting that some people probably love, but I just don't particularly like. And it has to do with the way it works with masking and cloning, especially. Krita also bogs down way sooner. Okay, so given the same image, all things being equal, I can have much better performance with Blender or with GIMP than I do with Krita. So such is life. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go back here, anime, and I believe we're going to images, or was it image reference? Let's find out. Okay, Akari's room, floor, and wall. Okay, I want to actually preview this. Okay, that was my sketch. And then there's the one that I want to work with. So that's cool. Floor and wall. Of course, I spelled the word "and" wrong. Okay, so now the first thing I'm going to do is add a layer mask. And I'm going to transfer the layers alpha channel. Okay, so now, as you can see from this little icon right there, it's like we're already in good shape here because now I can paint into this and see, I can't accidentally screw up the alpha. Of course, I'm going to have to fix this alpha area, but that's pretty easy to do. I believe, yeah, by just really, probably the best way to do it would be just catch the edges here. Let's catch the edges, just so I'm not fighting with those edges. Alright. And with GIMP, you can just hold down the Shift key. And well, you can erase stuff. Okay, now this image I would do well to actually, yes, I should save. Let's overwrite the ping first of all. Now I'm curious about something. Is Blender going to update that in real time? Nope. I'll tell you why. You need to do this. You need to do reload image, Alt-R. Okay, so now we've got that. Cool. And let's try this as well. Let's draw that and overwrite that. And now I'm going to hit Alt-R in this view and see if it does anything. Okay, Alt-R in the 3D view definitely does something. What would Alt R? Oh, I did a yeah, definitely Control Z. All right, so stupid attack, but that's interesting. You see that? Once I did something, it did update. So let's go like this. Overwrite that. And let's see what happens. Okay. So what if I just hit the R key? Nope, that doesn't do it. But if I hit Alt R and then undo again, now it doesn't update. Isn't that weird? So it updated and then it didn't update. So Alt R. Problem solved. Okay. Alright, so now the question now becomes, what do we want to do about this? Alright, so in GIMP, let's just get our... Okay, got to get my hotkeys correct. Okay, so I'm going to sample that color, and it appears that I'm actually in the mask. So O key to sample. Frankly, the color sampling is not as cool as it is in some other programs where you just, like in Blender, you just hit the S key and it samples it immediately. In My Paint, you hit the R key and it samples it immediately. Here you've got to sample and click. I guess we're not going to necessarily cry about that. But my purpose in doing that is to just turn down my saturation value a little bit, give myself a little bit different shade here, go back to here, hit the P key, and then I just want a brush that's got some noise to it. Okay. So I think what I really need to do is go like this so that I'm not going over into the window area and causing it to glitch. Okay, so that's going to there. So in order to maintain that perspective, we probably should just, sort of get that right. Now remember, we're going to have to at some point put the table in there too. So so now all I'm actually doing is just trying to create a little bit of color variation. Okay. As I said, we're going to have to address the problem of the ninja's shadows, but we also need to deal with the shadow of the wall itself. Okay, so in order to do that, I'm going to suggest that maybe what we want is in our selection tool. Like so many other things, I am really having to remember how to do this and do that. Okay, don't know why it did that, but I'm going to hit enter so that I can do a flood fill of a gradient of opacity that is somewhat low. Okay, cool. Alright, so that's definitely interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm experimenting here. I'm thinking about something else other than what I'm actually doing, because clearly this color should be pretty dark. Okay. I didn't really need to do it as a gradient, but there it is. So now what this says to me is, I think that I want to take this. I want to create a couple things here to really put some sizzle on this. And what I'm going to do is take that. This is why I was thinking about that gradient. Now I'm going to take that gradient. Okay, not bad. Not bad, but there's a problem. Okay. Okay, I had it close, but I didn't have it quite right. What I needed to do was this. Whoops. Sorry, bad. Bad, David, bad. Okay, let's get this. Okay. Now, and actually I think that might be a little too opaque. Let's turn that down. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to actually do this one. Okay. And this one is going to be, okay, so if this perspective line went to here, I think this would be higher. But it doesn't look as good. So I think we're gonna favor what looks good rather than what is actually technically accurate. Okay. Now what if we go like that? Okay. Let's go ahead and put it back in our scene just to see what we think. Alt R. Okay. So yeah. Not bad. So do we ever really see the table? We really don't. We actually would not see the table. So therefore, this is actually looking okay. Got a little hiccup right there, I noticed. Right there. What is that? Is that in the grease pencil strokes? No. Okay, and also I'm definitely, based on the composite color outlook, I'm leaning against having the overlaid grease pencil lines. Okay, so now that suggests, let's take a look at this rendered. Okay. Whoops. Okay. Okay, so what does that tell us? Well, number one, gotta grab this. Unfortunately, I have to go into wireframe mode just to know that I've actually grabbed the right thing. Okay, so I'm gonna hit the G key and then Shift. And I'm just waiting half a second for it to render. Okay. See how I got that lined up? Okay. That's better. So one thing I definitely see is that the that floor is too saturated. The entire image is too saturated. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and say let's keep loading. I know we're doing this the hard way, but let's keep loading it in, just because I think it would be good to, if we're going to accommodate the color corrections. Let's go here and you can see what's going on here. We're probably going to want to add that sort of a glowing effect. Material, texture, no. So now in this view, why is, oh, okay. I sure don't like the way that looks one way before it's rendered and another way after it's rendered. It does suggest some slight discrepancy between the UV mapping and the actual calculated mapping of the renderer, but I think we can work with that. What I'm kind of getting at, okay, yeah, see, look at that. So that's off, but if we render it, it's still off, but it's not off as much. And of course, the question we always have to ask is, can we get away with it? That's going to go by awful fast. And everything's dark. So this is what we're actually going to see with black behind it. Okay. So that it's going to be even darker than that, but if we had the world background, basically we have a background that's almost the same color as his pants, and he's going to be casting a shadow onto the floor. So therefore, this little gap here doesn't matter. We're not going to see it. Okay, so that's fine. So we can live with that. Okay, so not bad. Zoom in and see where he winds up. I'm seeing a lack of some shadowing in his in this character, but okay. So now the question becomes, do we want to try to bake our color correction into this whole thing? Save. I'm thinking we do. So that's going to require 2 steps. Number 1, let's do a let's take a bright blue and let's do a gradient in, I think, overlay mode that's going to be quite transparent. Okay. Okay, now let's lighten this up a little bit and let's flip the colors. Okay, I'm really having to guess here, but I think it's gonna be okay. Alt R. Alt R. Okay, that seems to marry together pretty nicely. And of course, everything has quit drawing. Okay, so now obviously the big question is, what are we doing with our ninja guys? This is what I'm going to suggest at this point. And I think this would be a good place to end this video for today. I'm going to be back later because there's a lot to do, but what I'm thinking is let's add a Krita. I hate you so much when you do this stupid stuff. Okay, one of the problems with Krita is every single time you ever didn't mean to, you destroy your screen layout by just clicking the wrong thing. You just click the wrong thing and it pops out. Now fortunately I created a preset, so it's not the end of the world, but it's so stupid. They used to have an icon here that would let you lock the panel, the Docker. You could lock it. It makes it impossible. But no, that was confusing for some people. Some people found that icon confusing. They don't find this one confusing. They don't find this one, or these 2 little tiny ones. Those aren't confusing. No. Oh no. But the one icon that allowed you to do something really useful, which is keep your whole screen layout from being destroyed because you happened to click the wrong thing, no, that was confusing. So they took it out. And as far as I know, as far as I've been able to look, because I have looked, they didn't replace it. They didn't just remove the icon, they removed the functionality. So it's impossible to lock your Dockers. If there's a way to lock your Dockers, somebody let me know. I would love to know that. Okay? So now here's what we're going to do. We're going to just add a layer here in Krita. And we're just going to grab a color like this, and we're just going to do a flood fill. And I think we need to isolate this layer, because otherwise it's going to be respecting the layers underneath it in terms of where it fills. So let's hit the fill tool and just do it. And now we can unisolate this layer. And we want this layer, I think, to be in overlay mode. And let's just look at what that does. Okay, so now this is kind of interesting. Because I know what we need to do. Let's do that. That solved it. Okay, actually that's not really working. I'm thinking multiply mode is really more what we're after here. So let me just do this. I think that's going to look good. Yep, that's what we're going with. File, save. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to render it out of Krita, which is going to take a little bit of time, and then just reopen the Blender project, and that will cause the image sequence to refresh. And then we're going to be pretty close to having that first shot, at least to the point where we can put the real distant background, which is obviously like mountains and sky and stuff. And it's going to start finally coming together. So I think with that, I'm going to stop because it's time to render. And I'll be back later.